Құрметті әріптестер, кеш жарық орталықтың ресми арнасына қош келдіңіздер. Good evening, colleagues. Бүгін бізде халықаралық жобасы аясында Нұр-Сұлтан қаласының 37-ші, 58-ші, 59, 67, 76 мектеп мұғалімдерінің іс-әрекеттегі зерттеулер тәжірибеге енгізуіне бір жыл бойы әдістемелік сүйемелдеу көрсетті. Әлі үйретудегі біз жетекшілеріміз Кембридж университетінің өкілдерімен онлайн кездесу. Кездесудің өздеріңіз білетіндей тақырыбы бірлескен іс-әрекетті зерттеу ұстаз тәжірибесінің жетілдірудің қозғаушы күші тақырыбында өтеді. Бүгін біздің онлайн кездесудің спикерлері Коллин Mclaughlin, Кембридж университетінің білім беру факультетінде білім беру инновациялар бөлімінің директоры, профессор, білім беру реформалары мен инновациялар тобының жетекшісі. Соңғы 10 жылда Қазақстандағы білім беру реформасымен айналысуда және мектептегі білім берудің жеке және әлеуметтік аспекттері бойынша үкіметтік емес ұйымдардың жетекшісі, кеңесшісі болып табылады. Кейт Эванс 2005-2015 жылдар аралығында Motivational колледж мектебінің директоры қызметін атқарды. Сол уақытта мектеп үлгерімі айтарлықтай жақсарып, және 2012 жылғы Ofsted оны барлық облыстарда көрнекті мектеп ретінде бағалап, Motivational колледж табысты оқу орнын қауымдастықтарды жалпы 10 көзқарасқа сенімге және үздік көшбасшылыққа бағыттау бағытында ең негізген білім беру тәсілін енгізген, әзірлеген. Осы біздің Нұр-Сұлтан 2013 жылдан бастап Кейт қазақстандық мұғалімдерді іс-әрекет зерттеуге қатысуға дайындайды. Көптеген қазақстандық мұғалімдер Motivational мектептерінде барып, жобаларды қалай жүзеге асыратынын және тәжірибе жүзінде көріп қайтып жүр. Енді осы біздің Нұр-Сұлтан қаласының мектептері 27 мұғалім 2019 жылы Motivational мектебінің қабылдаған мұғалімдерде болып, арасында сол кісілермен тәжірибе алмасып, әлгі күнге дейін осы тәжірибелерін үйренуде. Назипа Аюбаева, Назарбаев қорының білім жөніндегі бас сарапшы, доктор PhD, 2017 жылы Кембридж университетінің түлегі. Сонымен қатар Нұр-Сұлтан қаласында біздің осы білім басқармасының Нұр-Сұлтан қаласы әкімдігінің қолдауымен жүзеге асырып жатқан халықаралық жобасының жетекшісі. Қазіргі таңда барлық мектеп біздің жобамен айналысып жатқан мектептерді, координаторларды және волонтерлардың барлығын түгелдей күнделікті оқыту және іс-әрекеттерін жүргізуде. Енді құрметті әріптестер, өздеріңіз білетін жобасы біздің қазір Нұр-Сұлтан қаласында өте жақсы деңгейде жүруде, себебі деген барлық кірген мектептердің білім басшыларынан бастап түгелдей зерттеу іс-әрекетінің қалай бағытта жүруде екенін үйренуде, өз іс-тәжірибелеріне енгізуде. Міне осы бағытта біздің онлайн кездесу өте ерекше кездесу болайын деп тұр. Енді егер де сіздердің сұрақтарыңыз, сауалдарыңыз болатын болса, комментарийлерді әлеуметтік желіде Facebook парақшасында немесе YouTube каналда қалдыруларыңызға болады. Біздер тікелей эфирдің ең соңында сіздердің сауалдарыңызға жауап береміз. Мен енді келесі біздің модераторлықты ары қарай эфирді жүргізу үшін біздің халықаралық жобасының жетекшісі Назипа Аюбаева Алтынбековнаға беремін сөзді.
Сындар Маратовна, көп рахмет.
Назипа Алтынбековна.
Сындар Маратовна, көп рахмет. Естіліп тұр ма?
Назипа Алтынбековна, сіз естіп отырсыз ба?
Сындар Маратовна, естіліп тұр, сіздің кішкене интернетіңіз дұрыс болмай тұр ғой деймін, сондықтан мен бастай берейін.
Назипа Алтынбековна.
Біз естіп тұрмыз. Colleen and Kate, can you hear me? I think Sundar Maratna is having problem. Sundar Maratna, сіз неден шығып кеттіңіз, потому что интернетіңіз жөнді болмай тұр, естілмей жатыр бізге. Сіздің айтқаныңыз.
Назипа Алтынбековна, сіз сөйлейсіз, сізге сөз беріп жатырмыз.
So, good evening to all the participants in Kazakhstan, and good afternoon to my panel discussant. It's a great pleasure that we are having this great 2 panel discussions today. And we have to take an opportunity in order to thank the Center for Modernization of the Department of Education in Nur-Sultan City for having or giving an opportunity for us to talk about the action research. And the title of this session today is the Action Research is a Vehicle of the Teacher Improvement Practice. I would like, for the sake of the audience that is listening to us in English language, I would like to say that we have got Professor Colleen Mclaughlin as a panel discussant today. She is a professor of Cambridge University Faculty of Education, and she's the director of the Educational Reform and Innovation in the Faculty of Education, and she's been involved in the reform system in Kazakhstan in the past 10 years. And specifically, she is involved also in introducing the action research in Nazarbayev intellectual schools, and later on in the comprehensive schools, now working with the Nur-Sultan school. And we have got a practitioner and a researcher, Kate Evans, who has been a headmaster for the Boticem village school, who has been a visiting site for most of these schools from Kazakhstan, and action researchers in order to learn and to see how action research could change the lives of teachers. And as Sandar already mentioned, the Boticem village school has been ranked as an outstanding school and became a teaching school in Cambridgeshire, and also sharing the experience with other schools. This is a great achievement, but we know that there is a successor, and Kate is a freelancer, and she is still continuing working with Kazakhstani schools, and we are thankful that she joined us training the Nur-Sultan school teachers as well. So before we start our panel discussion, I would like to give some introduction how the action research traveled to Kazakhstan from the UK. I think we've started in 2013. Action research was introduced in the practices of Nazarbayev intellectual schools teachers. And first cohort of teachers traveled to Cambridge to see the practices and to learn about theory at the Faculty of Education, as well as the schools within the SUPE project. SUPE is a project initiated by the Faculty of Education, which is the School-University Partnership for Educational Research. And we had a great opportunity to visit some of the partner schools of the Faculty of Education, among which was the Boticem Village College. And Kate has been a great host for us. Since then, we've had a lot of visits to Boticem Village schools. Last cohort of teachers, as Sandar already told, was the last year in 2019. We sent 27 teachers to Boticem Village College, and as well as the Faculty of Education. So we hope that this will continue. And I know that during the introduction of implementation of the action research in Nazarbayev intellectual schools, Colleen, your team has developed the monitoring and evaluation system, and there were a great deal of learning happened about the teachers, about the system in Kazakhstan and school culture and so on and so forth. Probably we'll talk about it later on during the panel discussion. But now I would like to give the floor to you, Colleen, to talk about why action research is important for teachers, why action research in the schools. Would you just...
Thank you. Thank you, Nazipa. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. You're very, very welcome, and I'm very pleased to be here. Could we have the slide, please?
Sure. Just a second. I'll put on.
So while Nazipa's putting up the slide, just to say that there is a tradition in East Anglia.
Can you see the slide, please?
No.
No, not yet.
There is a great tradition in East Anglia of action research going back now 40, 50 years actually, and going back particularly to a man called Lawrence Stenhouse, who was a professor at the University of East Anglia. And you'll see in a minute, you'll see that the first slide, I saw it there for a second, Nazipa, and then it went away. It was there and then it went.
Okay.
I think it's behind our faces, so maybe people can see it, I don't know. And Stenhouse.
Can you see it? No?
No.
Okay, we'll just keep talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so
I think it's not working.
On the slide, my first quotation is one that I wanted to talk about from Lawrence Stenhouse. And it's a very famous quotation in action research now. And in it, he said, "It is teachers who in the end will change the world of the school by understanding it." And I really firmly believe that. I have watched policy come top down without the corresponding work from the teachers, without the study of the practice, and watch it collapse. I mean, the field of education is littered with educational policies that have made absolutely no difference to teaching and learning in the classroom. They may have changed the language that people use, but they haven't really changed practice. And it is the reason action research is so important is it puts the teacher and her practice center stage. Because that is, if nothing changes in the classroom, nothing changes at all. So that's the first thing. The second part of that quotation is the teachers have to come to be absolutely amazed and interested and fascinated in their practice and want to explore it, want to understand it, and want to ask the question, why did that happen when I didn't expect that? Or what happened there? Why is that student not engaging? So that quotation is very important to me in terms of why we do action research. And it's also, my second quotation from Stenhouse is the same point, really. There can be no educational development without teacher development. You have to, finally in education, we have learned that lesson. And now all the results of 20, 30, 40 years of research are understanding that teachers must be invested in, they must be supported, they must be developed. And then Stenhouse said, the best means of development is not by clarifying ends, but by analyzing practice. We all, both you and in the UK, live in a world where education has become outcomes obsessed. And that has been to the detriment of a great many things, in my view. And this is what Stenhouse means by ends. You don't just worry about what you're trying to get to. You must be concerned to understand how you get to that point and how you might change it. If you understand it, then you can change it. So my final point is that principles and processes matter. So it does matter how we develop our practice. It does matter that everything we do is make things better for students, not worse. It does matter that we don't just teach children to pass tests, but to become better human beings, to make sure there is justice in the way in which we do things, and to ensure that the principles respect everybody. So those are my basically big three reasons why I think action research really matters in education. I'll now hand over to Kate.
Thank you, Colleen. Well, good evening, everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to be with you, and thank you very, very much, Nazipa, for the invitation. I guess maybe I'll just try to build on or amplify some of the things that Colleen has been saying by putting them in the very concrete world really of being a school leader. So when I was appointed as a head teacher back in 2005, and I walked into a school that was very successful, had a very, very strong reputation. And my sort of analysis was that if the school was going to continue to thrive and succeed and improve, and I think that's what all successful schools are constantly trying to do, then to some extent we needed to just look at things a little bit differently. And one of the sort of areas that I identified was that I wanted the members of staff at the school to be more reflective. I wanted us to develop into a truly reflective learning community, and to do that by being reflective and looking outside, looking at what practice was going on elsewhere, you know, what could we learn from working more closely and collaboratively with other schools, but also from focusing down on what was happening in the classroom. So really keen to develop this idea of a reflective learning community. And my experience from a previous school and involvement with action research was that I could see that action research could be a really useful vehicle for helping to do that. But one thing I felt really very strongly about was that I felt that action research should be that vehicle. It should be integrated into the work of the school rather than being some sort of bolt-on or add-on. And I think that's one of the dangers in education, that we tend to sort of leap at and grab hold of different things and different ideas and different initiatives, and that sometimes, as Colleen said, they don't last the test of time. So for me, it was also important to begin as a school by thinking about rethinking with staff, with the community, with students, with parents, what was it that we wanted our vision of learning to be for Bottisham Village College at that time? And then how could we use action research to help us to achieve that? And again, just emphasising Colleen's point that if things were going to change, it wasn't just about a head teacher coming in with a vision, it was everybody's vision, and that vision had to be seen in practice in every classroom, every day, throughout the school. And so quite powerful, I think, then, in terms of action research helping to encourage individual teachers to constantly reflect on their practice and to learn what's working, what's not working, and to give them a sense of increased agency and voice, that what they were saying, what they were seeing in the classroom, their views, their opinions, their perspectives actually was central to improvement and driving the school forward. And that proved to be really quite empowering, I hope, for individual members of staff. Linked to that, I think the idea that, you know, very much, okay, a focus on what was happening in my classroom with the students that were in front of me, but encouraging people to open their classroom door, to actually speak and work with the people along the corridor in another part of the school, maybe in another school altogether, and feel confident enough to be able to collaborate, to be able to say when they were finding things difficult, and that might have been with a particular class, with a particular group of children, but being able to sort of put their hand up and actually say, this could be better, I need some help here. So the idea of, rather than doing that in isolation, of actually doing that within a community. And initially we started within a community within the school, a small group of colleagues who were interested enough to find out more and to try things out, so that you would be learning from your own reflections, the action research would be informing your own practice, but through going into other people's classrooms, by listening to the views of colleagues, the views of students, that experience would be all the more richer, really, and more powerful in terms of its impact. And that it really, really can help then as an opportunity to build trust and collaboration across the school initially, but then looking outwards, finding other like-minded schools and colleagues who wanted to work in the same way. So being able to learn from other people's successes as well. And I think what it can provide then is a real sort of multiplier effect, that actually you are, that learning community, actually you are benefiting more than the sum of the parts, actually, of everybody's contributions. So encouraging reflection, sort of helping to encourage collaborative working. And then the final bit that I'd mentioned for now, I think, is about trying to do things in a manageable way. And part of the strategy that we implemented was trying to find a variety of different ways to encourage people to be more reflective. And for some colleagues, that involved taking up the opportunity, for example, to follow a master's programme in conjunction with Colleen's Faculty of Education. For some, though, actually, that might have been too big a commitment. They might have not had that sort of, time available. Many of colleagues, I would say, lacking the confidence initially to do that, to thinking that just wasn't something for them, that they weren't up to it. And actually, through the vehicle of action research, just helping to encourage a sense of actually reflection and research can be for everybody. So I identify something in my classroom that is frustrating me, that I want to improve, and actually joining through the process of action research can help me in a very concrete way and relatively quickly to try to investigate that, to try things out, and maybe to improve things for the students that are in my care. And what we found was that through building that sort of trust and confidence in individuals, that many of those in time then did decide that they wanted to take things further, and they may then, a couple of years down the line, have been part of a group of master's students. But it was just this sense of overcoming some of the barriers that there might be to engaging in evidence-based research through a manageable and scalable sort of project. So those are, I suppose, my starters for 3, really.
Great. Thank you so much, Colleen and Kate. This is a great introduction why we have to do the action research. And I could hear some of the stuff that I like is sharing the values, trusting, engaging, collaboration, building the confidence, and so on and so forth. These are all great words that probably we also in our community we use. But do we do what we preach, or do we follow that what we'd like to see in our schools? I think it would be great to have the outsider view, because we might be very biased when it comes to our own schools, when it comes to the own communities and our own cultures. And I would like to connect it to the black box classroom as a black box, right? So this is kind of a word that connected to, I think, everybody's practice. We do want to open up our classrooms, but we are very scared, and we would like to shut our doors and do what we have. I mean, when it comes to our practices as a teacher, it's natural that you'll be scared to be criticized if someone comes to your classroom. And of course, at the same time, we'd like to have this building the trust, collaborating, sharing the experience, improving the practices in order to have the best quality of education for our children. But now I would like to connect to your practice in Kazakhstan, how it happened and what was the outcome. I mean, not what was the outcome, but how did you start the action research? And what was the some of the stuff you found similar when you started action research, and how it improved or not improved, in the sense that how it's taken in the different culture and different environment. So if I may ask Colleen to start first.
Sure, thanks, Nazipa. I think whenever you go to a different country, you see the similarities, but you also see the differences. And the differences are often about culture, tradition, and context. So I think I saw parallels between Kazakhstan and UK. But when we came to Kazakhstan, I think some things had happened in the UK that had made a difference that are probably occurring now in Kazakhstan. So I think the big one for me was in the role, how people perceive the teacher and how teachers perceive themselves, and especially if they perceive themselves as learners. So if I give a parallel with my own career as a teacher rather than in university, when I began teaching, it was not okay for teachers to have problems. It was not okay for teachers to admit a problem. because if you did that, you were risking being seen as incompetent. And then what has happened in the UK, I think, is a big shift, huge shift, to seeing the teacher as a learner, and the teacher as a lifelong learner. So we used to have short professional development courses when you were young, and then that was it. You stopped learning for your career as a teacher. That has changed radically. Now, every teacher would see themselves as learning all the time throughout their career about something else or the same even. So that is a shift that I think is now in Kazakhstan. But how you see the role of the teacher is very important. And if you are expected to know the answers to everything, to get it right every time, you are going to struggle with action research at first, because it will disturb you, because it's about asking questions. It's about questioning and analyzing practice. So that was one of the big differences we saw, that teachers weren't used to, in Kazakhstan, analyzing and reflecting on their practice. And because of that, nobody had helped them with the underlying processes that we know will inform us. So I've got a strong memory of teaching in NIS when we were doing the notion of critical friendship, where we gave feedback to each other. So somebody would do something, somebody would watch, and then you would give feedback. And at first, I was a little bit surprised, because the teachers were just criticizing each other. They were, and some of them very forcefully, and I thought, oh, blimey, we've got to go back and show them how you give learning feedback. And that if you give people criticism, they wither and die, like a flower with no water. If you can teach people. So we had to teach some of those processes. The second thing I would say that was significantly different in our cultures and in our traditions is the conception of research. How we see research, what we see research as, what we see as the content and the method of research. So in the traditions in Kazakhstan, which again I think is changing, the traditions valued a very scientific model, not a social science model, but a very scientific model of research, which was proving something or was experimenting, was very much rooted in seeing the world as either right or wrong, the right way to do it or the wrong way to do it. Whereas action research is rooted in a very different tradition of research, which is that research is about practice, it's about the real world. Real world research is a very good name for it. And so people did not like action research at first. They saw it as low status. And I think that has been something that is one of the other major differences. But even in Kazakhstan, I think we're discovering that action research on practice is essential if you're a policymaker, or if you are a head teacher or a teacher or a parent. So I think those were the big differences. I think one of the difference was there was, and still is, I think, in Kazakhstan, we'll come back to this later, a real preoccupation with getting it right. The idea that there is a right answer, not that there are many possible answers or many possible problems. And that, for me, is about insecurity. That is about not having confidence in my view of the classroom or my thoughts. So it's partly about autonomy, I think. So less familiar with analyzing practice. And that also, I think, comes from previous training of teachers, because you need to sow these ideas very early on in a teacher's career. So those, I think, the main things that we saw as different.
Yeah. Great. Kate, can you just comment on, probably we've learned a lot because we have worked with Nazarbayev Intellectual Schools and we had this evaluation and monitoring. And I can read out from the evaluation report, there was like a visible dominance of transmission view of teaching and learning, which is of course related to the curriculum, which was like settled by the Ministry of Education and you couldn't change. So this is understandable, but within the NIH practice, we try to introduce some academic freedom and autonomy for the teachers in order, and gradually probably this has changed and you could see some of the changes. Then there was another outcome from the monitoring saying that lack of attention to younger and more junior teachers' voice. This is more socio-cultural, and I'm quite sure that you have got something to say about it. And you have seen the high level of competition between the teachers because this is related to the attestation system. You have to show some innovation in order to be able to have the higher level of professional proficiency of the teacher in order to get your salary increase and so on and so forth. Related to these aspects, Kate, you have been a headmaster, and this is about the conditions to create the action research, right? So can you comment on some of the conditions that you have to create in order for action research flourish and to give some confidence to the teachers in comparison what happened in your school and what did you see in the practice of the Kazakhstani teachers?
Okay, yeah, I think I'll give that a go, Nazipa. I think my starting point about the similarities and differences would be that of course there are differences. There are differences in whenever you go and visit any two schools in the same country. So there were some differences. I think I was probably more overwhelmed by many of the similarities, or certainly when I looked back, sort of over my career, of thinking of at various points when things had changed quite significantly in the UK, and the UK had a very, for a long period of time, a sort of top-down sort of approach in terms of the curriculum, in terms of teaching and learning. And certainly when I started out, I deferred to older, more experienced members of staff, and I did my time, and things changed in the UK dramatically, I suppose is what I'm trying to say, as things have changed in Kazakhstan. The issue I think about that you've picked up about the conditions for change, whether it's through action research or anything, is something that I think we've learned a great deal about, how through reflecting on the work with NIS and then more recently as part of the Shen, how important that is. And I think a parallel that I would draw both with my experience in the UK and what we were sort of beginning to pick up and feel to some extent in Kazakhstan was that there's this danger, I think, in education of the latest fad or initiative that's going to be the solution to education. That's going to solve all of our ills, and that these just keep piling on top of each other, one after another. So as a school leader, that you can feel overwhelmed by that, but at the same point, you don't want to miss out. You don't want your school to miss out, because this might be the thing that's really going to make a difference. So for me as a school leader, and actually speaking with colleagues in Kazakhstan, just really working through how important it is to go back to, as a community, as a learning community, those basic values and your ethos and your vision. And we spent a lot of time through with NIS schools and then more recently with Shed, just trying to really support leaders to work through that. And the idea that then is the cornerstone, it's the reference point on which everything else hangs. So I suppose I would argue that, it's not action research for action research's sake. It's that action research can be powerful to help you to implement and achieve your vision. And that my belief, if that vision is going to be successful, it needs to be, again, it's not the head teacher's vision, it's the school community's vision. And that if you put the time in early on, developing that and getting people, stakeholders, to contribute to it, you then have a stronger lever and a stronger motivation for teachers then to get involved in things like action research, because they know what it is that we're trying to achieve. They've contributed to that, and that the action research can then help them to get to that point. I think it's hard. It was hard in the UK, and I think it's hard been hard in Kazakhstan. The idea that everybody's voice matters in that, and that if I'm, a relatively inexperienced classroom teacher, I'm going to be asked my thoughts and contributions to that. And actually establishing the conditions in a school, as a school leader, you've got a huge responsibility to be able to lead by example in that, in terms of inviting and setting up processes that encourage that sort of dialogue and discussion. That, as the head teacher, I am not the expert in everything. I'm not the expert on what's going in classrooms, that everybody's got something to play. So I think that would probably be the thing that I'd emphasize, I think, as much more than anything. I've actually, and sometimes I suppose both here, but maybe more so in Kazakhstan, because of the commitment and the dedication and the impatience almost to want change to happen straight away, because it's the young people that are in front of us now that we want to improve. Sometimes actually maybe a bit of frustration that things aren't happening quickly enough, but that, exploring and hopefully convincing the idea that if you want really meaningful and sustainable change and improvement, that it takes time, and establishing those conditions at the outset, I would say, absolutely essential.
Great, thank you so much, Kate. And I would like to pick up, you said some of the people, they would like to have the instant change, right? So this is kind of a ask from the officials, because you are spending the money from the budget and so on and so forth. On one hand, you can understand that somebody requires some kind of a measure. And on the second hand, you can understand that change is not going to happen so quickly. So in order to understand these two perspectives, you have to have something. And probably I'm hinting to the monitoring and evaluation in order to see how change happens, in order to make sure that you understand. And I myself was a bit frustrated when the Cambridge University came and said, we will do the evaluation and monitoring of NIS trainings. We have to see in the perspective how change are going to happen. Being part of this system, I can admit now that I was impatient to have these changes. But now looking back, I can see that actually the monitoring and evaluation can change your mindset in order to see how actually change happens. And if it's going to happen quickly in some of the minor steps, it cannot happen so quickly for the major steps, right? So here I would like to ask Colleen, why this evaluation and monitoring is important for their training that we are doing, because we do the training and we have to evaluate and monitor what is the outcome of this monitoring and training. Because in our culture, probably this is the smallest part of the training. You just train, you ask the people to leave and practice it, right? So you don't do the training, monitoring or evaluation of the impact of the training. But what would you say about this post monitoring evaluation and during the training evaluation monitoring?
Well, I know this has taken me a long time to say this, but the other day it struck me, well, of course we should be monitoring our practice, because it's putting into practice what we're asking the teachers to do. If we're asking the teachers to research and develop their practice and get feedback from parents and students and other teachers, the same is true for us as developers or policymakers or educators. You never know what is the factor that makes the difference in terms of what you're developing. What does it clash with? What does it not clash with? So, for example, you've already given the example, Nazipa, of how we set up an attestation system which was designed deliberately to foster facilitation, for reflection, collaboration, and ended up fostering competition. We didn't know that until we started to research it. And then we discovered that it had an unintended consequence. So when the British government and other governments around the world have insisted on increasing the testing, the unintended consequences have been profound, absolutely profound, in terms of how students think, how teachers teach, how head teachers experiment or don't because they're frightened. So these are really, really important things for us to understand. I think I might be repeating a few things here, but how our evaluation and monitoring affected us was first to realize about pace. One of the wonderful things about working in Kazakhstan is it is fast, it is enthusiastic, it is hugely enthusiastic and hardworking when you're working with teachers, and that's wonderful. But sometimes it's too fast. And the work we're doing here in Action Research is very, very deep work. It really is. You're asking teachers to, one of the quotes that sticks in my mind is to make the familiar strange, to see everything differently. Not only to see everything differently, but then to start engaging in asking questions and then asking them to change. And for a teacher, that is a really dangerous thing to do. Teachers spend years and years and years developing a practice they know works. And they have to do it in a very difficult context in a classroom. And to risk that is to risk everything. It's to risk your authority. It's to risk losing control of the class. It's to risk your identity even. So I can remember the first time when I said to a student, I don't know. Student asked me a question. And then when I became a trainer myself and the teacher asked me a question, I said, I don't know. I don't have all the answers. So what would you say? So I think the other thing is how we learn is how do we create this dialogue? How do we create a dialogue between the educators or the trainers and the teachers and their colleagues and their students? And that requires very different things from what many people expect of a teacher. And there's two ways you can do it. You can do it quickly and you will touch the surface. And people will say all the right words, but they won't be really understanding what they're doing. And they won't be being equipped to do it alone forever, So spending time, taking time. If I remember rightly, it took us 2 years with the NIS to begin to really embed the concepts of what people were doing. So I think those were very, very important. We had to try and slow it down. We had to work very hard to build trust and collaboration and encourage an open mind and questioning. And those are all very uncomfortable things when you first start doing. They disturb you. But I would just add one final point, which is that what we've learned from research is if you want a teacher to change, you do actually have to disturb them. But you have to judge that right. If it's too disturbing, they will just reject it. It's too much. So it's got to be disturbance with support and practice. How to manage expectations of policymakers, as you say, Nazipa, who are investing money and time is hard. So you also need somebody who's going to mediate between the teachers and, in a sense, protect the teachers and the policymakers and the school leaders and so on. I don't know if I've answered your question, but I will stop there.
Wonderful. I think this is very, very informative, at least for me.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Colleen. And you know what I picked up from here? I mean, you can come up with some of the discussion. I don't need to ask the question, right? So this is like a value system in the education. For example, you said that scores or the performance, if this is going to be the end result expected from the teachers, of course, they are going to work toward the end result.
Absolutely.
So nowadays we are having UNT, and there are a lot of debate happening, like who's performing well and who has scored the highest and so on and so forth, which is really disturbing because we are talking about in the renewed content for education about the value of learning. So the learning should be the process where you acquire some knowledge and experience and skills and so on and so forth. But at the end, you just answer to the multiple choice question that is going to devalue what you are doing. In this kind of an environment, this is going to be very, very difficult for the teachers to balance. For example, if they would like to be action researchers and value learning and make sure that the students learn, but at the end of the day, they have to prepare them for the performance. I don't know how to balance it because I'm not working as a teacher now in the school.
I think this is so important because yesterday I was in a conversation about the current situation, COVID, what it's doing to students, and about the need to come up with a new model of education. And there was some research reported yesterday about students and how they see themselves and what they learn from school, and what they worry about. Of course, they were a little bit worried about COVID. Who isn't? And of course, they were worried about missing their friends and their schools. But the thing that they were most worried about was exams. And the thing that gets in the way of real learning, I would say, is worrying about exams. So, because you can't do what great learners do, which is experiment, let yourself fail, and so on. Those things go. But I'll stop and let Kate have a... I can see she's dying to get in here.
Yeah. Oh, she's muted.
She's muted.
Sorry. Yeah. No, there's a doorbell going in the background, so I was just not wanting everybody to have to listen to that.
Don't worry. Yeah, so
I think, Nazeepa, if I could just, as was just really very, very taken that sense of the values approach to education, and it's certainly something that over the past year or two here has actually been a huge topic of debate about principled leadership, and leaders in schools having to step up and be really clear and have the confidence to actually to follow, if you like, follow the line, pursue sort of areas that they think are really important to what is it we want the education offer to be for our young people. Yes, examination results and outcomes are clearly important because they're a passport to improved lives and so on, but actually of making sure that we don't, as school leaders and teachers, we don't lose everything else around that, and that the two are not mutually exclusive, I suppose is what I believe, that you can have very strong values throughout everything that you're doing in a school and still achieve very positive outcomes for young people. But it's a difficult a difficult balancing act. And certainly I think, that sense, it comes back for me to the whole bit about the ethos of the school and the culture of the school, and teachers feeling confident that they are being given permission, to try things out in their classrooms, and that yes, sometimes that won't work, but often they will, and they will lead to improvements. But we can't expect teachers to be able to do that in isolation, or if they're feeling that it's a hugely that accountability trumps everything. We've really got to work hard on establishing those conditions to allow teachers to have the confidence to do that.
And coming back to SHARE project now, we are working on the SHARE project now. It's been 9 months, right, since we started this great project with Nur Sultan schools, with the support of the Akim of the Nur Sultan city and the Department of Education, and we have got the Center for Education Modernization, which is coordinating and helping us out. I think we can see some of the teachers, they are very dedicated, and they have this, this moral purpose in education without looking at the end result. They are trying to do a great deal of work in order for students to learn, students to achieve better results. And even we could see from the poster discussion and from the discussion that they care about each child, because they are looking at their family issues, the environmental issues, or the friends, and within the classroom, they're picking up and doing some of the work. So I'd like to look at the share closely. So what we've learned from NIA schools and what we are doing in Nur Sultan schools, how this is informing our own practices, and how do we see the Kazakhstani teachers nowadays with the renewed content of education, some autonomy, some academic freedom, and probably some of them, they are now into the action research principles and the processes. Anybody?
One of the things we haven't had a chance to talk about is how motivational action research is for teachers. And I think this is really important. It touches on two things for teachers that, in my experience, I've observed, and I've observed it in Kazakhstan as well, is it's motivational for teachers because they feel they're being prized, but it's also intellectually interesting because finally they're getting a new energy in looking at their teachers. Teaching. I think it also increases their professionalism. So I still will never forget a visit to, this is not in Nur Sultan, but to a rural school in the middle of nowhere down in the south of Kazakhstan, where we were talking about the new curriculum with these teachers, and one of them said, it is wonderful to have some autonomy. Just a little bit, to decide how I'm going to teach this lesson, not follow a prescribed chart, and also to be able to prepare my own materials. For this is all something that teachers who really care about their profession and their task find really motivating. I think what we are doing in Nur Sultan is a really important opportunity, actually, because it enables us to put into practice what we've learned in Kazakhstan and what we've learned in the UK. And they're different ways of doing things, but bringing them into a sort of hybrid model that works for Kazakhstan, I think that's hugely important. I think I'll just make two more points. One is that it is a way of work. So what we're trying to do is not just to work with individual teachers, but we're working with schools, whole schools, and we're trying also to work across schools. Now that's very complex and requires time and care. I think what we are learning about is the importance of those whole school conditions and of building them, building an understanding in Kazakhstan. What does it look like? And there are some structural barriers. For example, the Stavka. The Stavka does not pay teachers to meet together, talk together, collaborate, reflect. It pays them for face-to-face teaching. That's a huge barrier because if you are going to develop teachers, they've got to work together. They've got to have time for professional discussion. I think the other part of that is if you're going to start something new, you've got to stop something. You can't just stuff this bag more and more and more full. You've got to make the space. And one of the things that I will never forget is something that Kate did in her school, which was to look at how teachers spend their time in meetings. And she abolished any reason for a meeting other than talking about teaching and learning. And that was radical, because teachers stopped talking about administration, bureaucracy, money, forms, and they talked about teaching and learning. So I would just say one other thing, that I heard a school presentation a couple of weeks ago from one of the Nursultan schools where they presented something, and I was sitting there thinking, oh my God, this isn't going to work. And right at the end of it, the principal said with a beaming smile on her face, we decided it didn't work and we started again. So she said, we started off thinking it was a problem with the pupils, and then we realized it was a problem with the teachers. And I thought, that is a radical change. And it starts to show that learning mindset that, and if we can do that in Nursultan, if we're given the time to do it, and we've put the resources around the project to support the schools, it will change the mindset and the processes in those schools, I think, for the better.
Right. Great. Kate?
Just a couple of thoughts, really. I think one, I mean, exactly the same as the situation with the NIS schools in the first project, just overwhelmed, I suppose, just by the dedication and commitment of all of the staff that were taking part, but also sort of parallels, you know, if you like, in terms of the journey that those members of staff went on over a period of months of, you know, beginning very keen to be there. I think a sense of that they were thrilled that their schools had been selected, that they were able to be part, so feeling as though this was an important project and they were happy to be in it, but a real feeling of apprehension and anxiety about what might be involved, and would they be able to cope, and that manifested itself sometimes in the room with, you could almost, you know, feel that sort of, you know, people holding themselves back and worry. And that over time, and I can think of a few particular sort of key moments where it was almost sort of a breakthrough, and the body language began to relax, and people began to smile, and people began to speak more spontaneously. And it was, I suppose, the parallel in a way really was, with hindsight, I think what we were, you know, Colleen and Jenny and I and Nazipa yourself and others who were involved, were also, I suppose, trying to model how you establish those conditions within the group of people that we were working with. It's some of those things that can then be taken back to school. But also that another thread that's gone over that period of time through the shared project, I think, are just watching the relationships within schools and between schools changing and developing, and, you know, the trust building and people being more open and more honest and more prepared to say when they weren't sure of something, or that, you know, something they tried, as Colleen said, hadn't worked. And again, I can think of a very, very key moment in back the end of last year on the visit to Cambridge, when one of the principals sort of as part of a presentation just talked about how the reflection that she had been making about her approach and her style to leadership, and actually what involvement in this program was teaching her about genuinely being committed, you know, if you like, to developing a really distributing leadership to the classroom teachers, to the middle leaders, whoever it might be. And you know, so it's what's happening in the classroom, hopefully changing as a result of this work, but much more sort of, I would say, far-reaching things in terms of the way that people are leading and interacting with each other is changing as well. And I think that's, you know, personally, I just think that's so important and really powerful. And in terms of the sustainability of the project, way beyond the time limit when we might be working together, that this is just helping, hopefully, with that longer term sort of work.
Can I add one thing? I think the fact that we also were doing this in COVID time was a bit of a shock. How do we carry on with this program without being there? But I actually think that's been really good for us. I think it's been really, really good for us because it's made us think about how the teachers learn, what sort of support they can have, whereas before we just assumed, oh, we'll do a workshop. And I think we've devised a program that is much more suited to teacher learning. So it involves some, if you like, whole class teaching. It involves some mentoring or coaching. It involves some sharing between schools. And I think it's actually a better model than the one we had before, even though we're doing it at a distance. It would be even better if we could be there for some of the time. But I think we have learned a lot about how to work with schools and teachers during this time.
Wonderful, great. So we've been working for an hour now. It's been a wonderful discussion. And what I could say from what I'm like seeing from the practice of the SHARE project, that as Colleen said, they are having the second breath, because you can see that they would like to be part of action research because this is directly related to their job, and they handle the professional practices in a way to reflect on their practices. And we've been talking that it's like, you know, the sport people opening the second breath and running even harder, right? So this is giving kind of a sense that they have got now this instrument that is going to help them to think about the practices in a way that they can handle this practice. This is not somebody is going to tell them what to do, but we are responsible, and you can see some accountability for the learning process.
Yeah.
And also some of them, they are already thinking about, you know, are we actually using our time properly, effectively, because they're teaching for 38 hours, some of them 40 hours, you know. So probably you are right that we have to think about the bigger picture when it comes to the policy, Stavka system, and providing the people, teachers, some time to think about it. That it was a very good example from Borishan Village School that Kate has done, like making the meetings more professional and more encouraging in order to motivate the people to think about the teaching and learning. This is wonderful. I hope that the audience are getting a good sense of what is action research. Now I'd like to turn to the live comments, and if they've got any questions. Синдар Маратовна, если есть вопросы, можете вывести на экран?
Да.
Я могу прочитать это. Okay. So we'll turn to the
comments.
questions.
One question. The first question was, Bakit Kulta Muratova, you're here to undertake reforms that will be effective. Am I right?
So do you see the question, Kate?
The first question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kate, do you want me to go first or what?
Yeah, you have a go.
I don't think we're here to undertake reform. I think we are here to partner with, in this case, the Hakim and his staff in Nur Sultan to help build the capacity of other people to go where they want to go and do what they want to be able to do. I don't think anybody from the outside can make reform happen. And I'm afraid not even policymakers can do that. You know, unless you work with people and you walk alongside them rather than leading them by the nose, you won't get anywhere.
Good. Any тағы да бар ма сұрақтар?
No. So the one question. Басқа комментарийлер бар? Thank you very much. So we are, hello, and good luck. Our teachers and good luck our mentors. Thank you.
Okay. I think most of the people who are watching us are the part of the SHARE project.
Thank you very much, our teachers,
well, that's good. That's
our
good.
mentors.
Yeah, and
They're really informative.
information. Сындар Маратовна, мен оқып шығайын қазір, жарай ма? So most of the people, they are saying thank you for the informative session.
Thank you.
And I can see some of the people from Share Project, they say that thank you, it's very important for us. We hear that we are changing. I think it's very informative. I understand why we should conduct research now.
Yes.
And this was very interesting. Good luck. And some of them, they're calling good luck our mentors. So I think they're enjoying to listen to us. And probably in order to wrap up, because we've been working already, can I get one thing that you think we have to do in Kazakhstan in order action research to become a part of our school life and the education system? That if you would like to pick up one thing that we have to do now, and this is going to be the
Thank you very much, our mentors.
Сейчас я задала вопрос, сейчас пусть они ответят, пожалуйста, потом я вам скажу, Сындар Маратовна, когда закончить. Yeah, Kate, would like to go?
Yeah, I think the thing for me would be of just realizing and taking hold of the expertise that is developing in Nur-Sultan schools at the moment. So, the group of people who are involved, the researchers, the development group, Nasipa, that you've set up, that Nur-Sultan has got a really high quality growing resource there. And in terms of longer term sort of sustainability and embedding the benefits of action research, my belief really that those people should be at the heart of it. And, you mentioned at the beginning that the school that I used to lead was a teaching school. And that was part of its remit, really, the responsibility, not just for the school in which I was leading, but actually to support developments in other schools. And I think you've got really, really high quality, dedicated people there. I would say make sure you use them.
Great, thank you. Colleen?
Thank you for the kind comments and the good luck, by the way. So I think I would say don't try and make it simple. Don't be frightened of the fact that action research is complex, or it's not action research, it's teaching and learning in a classroom is complex. And don't try and make it simple. Don't try and seek the answer. Stick with the complexity. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to add two other things. I'm going to say, create the space in the school for teachers to do it properly. In other words, what are you going to stop doing? And go slow. Don't be pushed into going fast, making it simple, doing it on top of 100,000 other things.
Thank you so much. And from me, I would like to finish our session. Again, going back to the first slide that was presented by Colleen, it is a teacher who is in the end will change the world of school by understanding. So with this, I think I would like to thank you both for this great panel discussion, and I will say it in Russian language so audience would understand. Уважаемые коллеги, большое спасибо. Мы завершаем свое обсуждение. Я бы хотела от себя добавить, что действительно Колин начала эту сессию о том, что это только учителя поменяют вообще, что происходит в классе или же в школе, поняв, что происходит внутри школы и внутри класса. Большое спасибо всем за участие. И я хочу поблагодарить от вашего имени наших панелистов, профессора Колleen Mclaughlin и исследователя практика Кейт Эванс. Большое спасибо. До следующих встреч. Thank you so much, and I'll see you around.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Bye.